Many of the world's superpowers took part in World War I, commonly known as the Great War, which raged from 1914 to 1918 and faced difficult life during World War I. Societies, economy, and daily life underwent significant transformation as a result. The political, social, and economic climate of the 20th century underwent enormous and long-lasting change as a result of World War I. It left a legacy of lessons learned about the terrible effects of international fighting, which impacted the efforts made in the years following World War II to create international institutions intended to foster peace and cooperation between states. Recruitment and mobilization. Millions of soldiers were enlisted to fight as the war got underway in Europe and other parts of the world. Young men enlisted willingly as a result of a spike in patriotism during recruitment operations. Physically fit males who were frequently the main breadwinners were dispatched to the front lines, leaving women, kids, and the elderly in charge of their homes and towns because of the war effort. The Western Front witnessed trench combat and harsh living conditions for the soldiers. These tunnels frequently included dirt, water, and pests. The fear of hostile fire, chemical assaults, and sickness persisted for soldiers. Living in the trenches was characterized by boredom, terror, and the constant threat of death. In the midst of the violence, the 1914 Christmas truce was a wonderful display of humanity. In defiance of the hatred of the war, soldiers from both sides put down their weapons, sang carols, gave gifts, and played football in the middle of nowhere. One of the moving illustrations of trench warfare is the Battle of the Somme, which took place between July 1 and November 18, 1916, during World War I. It was one of the bloodiest and most infamous engagements of the conflict, exposing the difficulties and atrocities that soldiers on both sides had to deal with. Along the Western Front in northern France, the British and French armies commenced the Battle of the Somme against the German army. The goal was to reduce German fortifications, release pressure on the French at Verdun, and finally end the standoff that had typified trench warfare. The men suffered under appalling circumstances in the trenches. The land was a quagmire due to heavy rains in the weeks before the conflict. The movement was challenging since muck in the trenches was sometimes knee-deep. The trenches had a rat infestation, and lice were a regular annoyance. Soldiers had to endure cold, wet, and unclean conditions every day. Civilians had their own set of difficulties on the home front. Rationing, inflation, and food shortages all became commonplace. To aid in the war effort, women filled tasks formerly filled by males, laboring in offices and factories. The purpose of propaganda efforts was to raise morale and motivate people to support the war by buying bonds, recycling, and volunteering. Rosie the Riveter's picture on the "We Can Do It" poster became a symbol of the labor sacrifices made by women during World War I, encouraging generations of women to pursue occupations outside the house. There were important military technology advances during World War I. The battlefield was transformed by the use of airplanes, tanks, machine guns, and poison gas. These developments altered the character of combat, making it more lethal and automated. The Red Baron, a brilliant German fighter pilot known as Manfred von Richthofen, is an iconic figure in the history of aerial combat. He demonstrated the new use of aviation in battle by shooting down 80 hostile aircraft. Consequences and aftermath. The world had a difficult task ahead of it when the war finally finished in 1918. Heavy reparations were placed on Germany by the Treaty of Versailles, laying the groundwork for future wars. Millions of people were killed and injured throughout the conflict, leaving deep wounds on people and communities as a whole and generating a general yearning for peace. The League of Nations was founded in an effort to stop future wars following World War I. The foundation for the present United Nations and international diplomacy was formed by this effort, even if it eventually failed to stop World War II. Primary impact of World War I on human life. The events of World War I, which took place between 1914 and 1918, had a significant impact on the evolution of history. These are the primary impacts of World War I. 1. The loss of human life. World War I was one of the worst wars in history, with an estimated 21 million fatalities and over 10 million injuries. The nations involved and the relatives of the deceased were deeply saddened by this enormous loss of life. During World War I, around 10 million soldiers were martyred. Soldiers from all the major warring nations, including the Central Powers such as Germany, Austria, and the Ottoman Empire and the Allies, British Empire, Russia, France and the United States, were among those who passed away. The impact of conflict on civilian populations, including bombings, blockades, and illness, led to large civilian deaths as well. An estimated 6 to 13 million people perished throughout the conflict. 2. Economic destruction. Infrastructure, villages, and cities suffered significant devastation as a result of the conflict. Numerous countries were left with large debts as a result of the tremendous economic expenses. Germany's military effort came at a tremendous financial cost. The government took on a huge amount of debt to pay for the war. The German government turned to money creation to pay off this debt. The hyperinflation caused by this inflow of money significantly undermined the value of the German mark. One American dollar, for instance, was roughly equivalent to 12 German marks in January 1919. By November 1923, 4.2 trillion German marks were required to purchase $1. Germany and its allies were held solely accountable for beginning the war under the terms of the 1919 Treaty of Versailles. Germany was compelled by the Pact to pay the Allied nations significant compensation for losses and damages incurred during the war. These restitutions totaled a staggering amount that was first set at 132 billion gold marks but eventually decreased, but was still considerable. Germany's post-World War II economic collapse and hyperinflation left a lasting mark on the communal memory of the country. It served as a sobering reminder of the negative effects of both economic mismanagement and conflict. These events would eventually affect Germany's post-World War II economic policy and approach to budgetary discipline. The economic devastation of World War I was marked by debilitating war debt, hyperinflation, interrupted commerce, and territorial losses, notably in the case of Germany. The long-term effects of these economic challenges included social instability and political radicalism in the post-war era. Germany serves as an illustration of how the repercussions of the war's economic consequences may be long-lasting and fundamentally alter the political and economic landscape of a country. 3. Political transitions. Several monarchs, notably the Russian, German, and Austro-Hungarian empires, fell as a result of the conflict. In their stead, new political formations like the Soviet Union and several successor governments in Central and Eastern Europe developed. World War I was a period of profound upheaval and transformation, affecting every aspect of life. The experiences of soldiers in the trenches, civilians on the home front, and the enduring impact on societies worldwide reminds of the human capacity to endure and adapt in the face of adversity. The lessons learned from this global conflict continue to shape the world, serving as a poignant reminder of the importance of peace, diplomacy, and cooperation in preventing future conflicts. Thank you for watching. Help the channel grow by liking, commenting, subscribing,